The two most important moments of fishing a bottom bouncing bait are on the initial drop and that moment when it first hits the lake bed. Let me explain a little bit. In a 2017 article by Steve Quinn in Fisherman called Understanding Fish Vision, he goes into a portion of it that talks about the lens of the fish and the difference between the lens in a human eye and the lens in popular game fish. We can adjust our lens very, very easily. We can stand in one spot, focus on something close, and then we can focus on something in the distance with clarity. Fish do not have that same ability to make those complex lens adjustments. So what often happens is you will see a bass, and he talks about it, and we see it all the time on this channel. They will come up to something and look at it just inches away, turn, tilt to really get a good idea of what it is they're looking at and decide if they want to eat it. We see it all the time here in these videos where the bass will come out of apparently nowhere, come right up to that camera, and then they will kind of move to the side and turn, and we can watch their eyes go up, down, and all around and take in information of what is this camera, and they are just inches away from it so many times. Now with the camera here, they're not thinking about eating this, but they're still gathering information. Now think about that same behavior as they notice your lure dropping through the water column. When they come up to investigate it, when they're not in that super aggressive mood, but they're curious and want to see if they do want to eat it, they come up just inches away to make that last decision, that final decision. Are they going to eat this? Well, we so often make that lure look unnatural. Now remember, if the fish are aggressive and the bite is aggressive, those big hops and those big movements, that can trigger those bites. But if you're not getting the bites you think you should, or you're having a tough time getting any bites, when that lure first hits the bottom, imagine that fish just inches away from it and how subtle those movements are to get that fish to commit. If you've ever seen Dave Mercer's channel, Facts of Fishing, check out his YouTube Shorts feed. He has so many great examples of this. He's got clip after clip of bass coming down and investigating lures and inhaling them either on the drop, a slow, subtle drop, or when that lure is down there on the bottom and he's imparting just the tiniest movements to that lure. It looks at it and then inhales it. Well, as anglers, there are three ways that I like to think about that can help us do this and slow down and not move those lures too terribly much. If you think about the smallest movement of your wrist through a rod that's 7 foot long or more, it doesn't take much with your wrist to make a huge movement down there. Well, number one, if you want to use the rod, if you're most comfortable using the length of that rod to put some wiggle and action on that lure, do so with a little bit of a slack line, a bow in your line. That will take bigger movements at that rod tip and make them very subtle and natural down where the lure is on the lake bed. Number two is with a little bit of a taut line or tighter line. You can go ahead and use your finger and just barely twitch that lure. A lot of you have talked about stitching the lure and it works so good. As you can see a lure right here with this little bit tighter line and just barely moving it with the finger, how natural and lifelike it looks if you've got a bass watching it just inches away. And the last thing that I like to do is use lures that have got this added movement without any help from us. And I'm talking about things like soft plastic tubes and jigs where you've got that skirt material or those tentacles that will move and expand for a few seconds after that bait hits the bottom. And oftentimes that just slightest bit of movement looks so real, and that's all it takes to get the fish to commit. The physiology of the bass and needing to get up close to something to inspect it is also exactly why the wacky rigs work so well. As anglers, we don't put any type of action on the lure because we know as it's sinking, it's got that great little shimmy to it. Now here's an example with a jig that is just a few inches away from the camera, kind of like a bass getting up close and inspecting this lure. And I'm just stitching it with the line, and you can see how real and natural that looks. Here's that same jig with the camera backed away a few feet. This gives us great perspective on how little I am actually moving that lure. When we are testing lures out on the shoreline or on the boat deck and we tie something on and want to see how it looks, think about the distance that we're standing there. We could be 7, 8, 9, 10 feet away or more and watching that lure. We need to be thinking about what's that lure look like this far away. And hey, if you want to watch a video that talks about a very interesting feeding behavior of bass I've been able to witness, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.